Have you ever walked into a room and felt every hidden scar on your soul rip open at once? That's what happened to me the night I walked into my sister's wedding, 11 years after my parents threw me out like trash, after they stole my future, after they replaced me with her. And yet, when I showed up in that ballroom, I wasn't the broken girl they remembered. I was the woman who built an empire from nothing, and I came with the power to end every lie they'd ever told. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stick with me until the end, because this isn't just about betrayal, it's about justice. It's about clawing your way back when the people who should have loved you the most tried to bury you. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or betrayed by family, this one's for you. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe because every story here is about turning pain into power. Now, let's begin. The first time I realized my family didn't see me as a daughter but as a disposable tool, I was 19. Rain hammered down that night, plastering my hair to my face as I stood on the porch with a suitcase in one hand and betrayal burning in my chest. My father's voice echoed in my ears. "If you're too ungrateful to help at the clinic, don't bother coming back." Then the door slammed, final and cold. That was the night they cut me out of their lives. My name is Amber. I grew up in Vermont, the daughter of two small-town doctors who ran the Collins family clinic. From the outside, we looked perfect. A respected family, two beautiful daughters, the kind of people everyone in our community admired. But what people didn't see was the hierarchy inside our house. Grace, my younger sister, was the chosen one. She was delicate, charming, the golden child with the piano recitals and the perfect smile. My parents worshipped her. Me, I was the worker bee, the girl who answered phones at the clinic after school, who babysat neighborhood kids for extra money, who quietly carried the load no one else wanted. When I was accepted into college, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me. They'd saved a fund for my education since I was a kid, and I dreamed of Stanford, of building a life beyond our small town. But when I logged into my bank account the summer before classes started, the money was gone. Transferred. Just like that. I confronted my parents, shaking, holding the empty statement in my hand. My father barely looked up from his medical journals. We decided Grace would benefit more. She's Stanford material. You'll be fine at community college. Fine. That word seared me. Fine meant invisible. Fine meant undeserving. Fine meant sacrifice. Again and again, until there was nothing left of me. I packed my suitcase that night. My mother didn't stop me. My father slammed the door behind me. Grace? She was on a spring break trip to Cancun, funded by the money that should have been my education. For months I drifted. I slept on friends' couches. I showered at the IMCA. I worked 3 jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop, evenings at a hospital reception desk, weekends at a call center, just to keep myself afloat. There were nights when I ate ramen 3 times a day, nights when exhaustion pulled me into sleep before I could finish my homework. But I refused to quit. At the hospital, I met Michael. He was a young resident then, all sharp eyes and messy hair, curious about the diagrams I'd scribbled in the margins of my textbooks. One night, he stopped at my desk during my dinner break. "You understand Kellerman's patient flow theory?" he asked, surprised. "It's flawed," I replied without looking up. "The bottleneck isn't intake, it's the documentation requirements between departments." He pulled up a chair. We talked until my break ended. That conversation became dozens more. Soon we were sketching ideas on napkins, trading thoughts between shifts, dreaming of a system that could revolutionize patient monitoring. 7 years later, those dreams became Medova, a healthcare technology company worth hundreds of millions. By the time I turned 30, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. CEO of Medova, married to Michael, mother to a beautiful 6-year-old boy named Leo. who had his father's eyes and my stubborn streak. We lived in Boston, in a sunlit apartment filled with books and laughter. I buried the Collins name, or so I thought. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, addressed not to me but to Michael. Dr. Daniel Brooks, cardiothoracic surgeon, marrying Grace Collins. The name didn't register at first. Grace had always been Grace Collins to me, my younger sister who'd taken everything. I didn't connect her to Daniel Brooks until I saw the venue printed in gold script. Evergreen Resort. My stomach dropped. Michael looked at me across the table. "You okay?" I forced a smile, just surprised. I didn't know Grace was getting married. We debated going. My instinct was to burn the invitation and move on. But Michael, steady as ever, said, "We earned our place in that room. Don't let them erase you." He was right. For too long, I'd let their lies define me. Maybe it was time to walk back into their world, not as the girl they threw out, but as the woman I became without them. The night of the wedding, the Evergreen Resort glittered with chandeliers and marble floors. Wealth whispered through the air, and my heels clicked against the polished stone like punctuation. Michael's hand rested on my back, grounding me. Leo tugged at his bow tie, grumbling, "Mom, this thing is choking me." "Just for a little while, buddy," I murmured, adjusting it. "Remember our deal. Good behavior now, swimming pool later." Then the crowd parted, and I saw her. Grace. She stood in her white gown, champagne glass raised, laughing, that same too bright laugh I remembered from childhood. 11 years had passed, but I recognized every tilt of her head, every calculated gesture. Our eyes locked across the room, and the champagne flute trembled in my hand. She gasped, audibly, loud enough that heads turned. The music played on, but a bubble of silence stretched between us. Behind her, my mother's face rained of color, before flushing crimson. My father moved closer to shield her, as he'd always done. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. For a second, I was 19 again, standing in the rain with a suitcase, begging for a scrap of love. But then Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "My wife is a guest," he said. "She's the CEO of Medova. We were personally invited by the groom." The name Medova rippled through the crowd like electricity. Whispers spread. Recognition dawned. CEO. I stood straighter, my Valentino dress shimmering in the light. The scared girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built something from nothing, who refused to disappear. The air in the ballroom grew thick, charged, like everyone sensed a storm brewing. My mother's lips were pressed so tight they looked bloodless. My father muttered something under his breath, guiding her toward a corner like I was a contagion she needed distance from. Grace clutched Daniel's arm, her knuckles white against the silk of her dress. And me? I stood taller, smiled wider, as if their scorn rolled off me like rain on glass. But inside, my pulse hammered. My hands tingled from the force of keeping them steady around the stem of my glass. "Amber Collins?" Someone whispered behind me. I thought she was gone. "Medova? That's her?" Another voice chimed. The whispers swelled like a tide, circling me, feeding the fire in my chest. They wanted me invisible. Instead, I was unforgettable. Grace broke first. She crossed the floor, her gown rustling like a flag in the wind. Her smile was bright, brittle, barely holding together. "Sister," she said, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "I didn't expect you." "Clearly," I replied, letting my gaze drift pointedly to the invitation clenched in my hand. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me. "This is my night, Amber. Don't ruin it." I tilted my head. Funny, I thought weddings were about family. Her lips trembled, but she recovered quickly, the way she always did. "You forfeited that word when you left." "When I was thrown out," I corrected. The silence between us was sharp. dangerous. Daniel, tall, handsome, polished, shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth. He tried to smooth it over with charm. Well, we're glad you came. Right, Grace? Grace's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. Of course. The evening dragged forward. Dinner was served, salmon with lemon butter, tiny portions meant to impress. Guests mingled, glasses clinked. But beneath the glittering surface, tension simmered. Every time I glanced at my parents, I caught them watching me, whispering furiously. Leo, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents, played with the toy cars I'd stashed in my purse. Michael, ever the anchor, kept a steady hand on my knee under the table, his eyes telling me, "You're not alone this time." But the weight of the past pressed hard. Memories clawed at me. The night I left, the years of absence, the loneliness of building a life without even a word from them. And now, sitting across from them at a table dressed in white linen and crystal, it all came crashing back. After dinner, as couples drifted onto the dance floor, Grace cornered me near the restrooms. "What do you want?" she hissed, her perfect bridal smile gone. I crossed my arms. "Excuse me? You show up after more than a decade, acting like you belong here. You don't. You left us. Don't rewrite history, Grace. I was thrown out because Dad decided you deserved my college fund more than I did." Her cheeks flushed pink, fury flickering in her eyes. "You were never cut out for Stanford. I was. Maybe. But it wasn't your decision. And it sure as hell wasn't theirs to make for me." Grace leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "This is my day. My perfect day. Don't you dare ruin it with your bitterness." I smiled coldly. "Funny. I was just thinking how bitter you looked when I walked in." She stormed away, heels clacking against the marble. For a moment, I felt triumphant. But then the doubt crept in. Was I really here for revenge? Or was I here because some part of me still wanted recognition, still wanted the family who had erased me to admit they were wrong? The answer came during the speeches. Daniel's best man gave a sweet toast. Grace's college roommate followed, with a tearful one. Then my father stood. He cleared his throat, his voice heavy with practiced gravitas. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the union of Grace and Daniel, but the culmination of years of dedication. Grace has always been our pride, our brightest star, the one destined for greatness." My chest constricted. He went on, weaving a narrative where Grace was the hard-working daughter, the sacrificial lamb, the hero of our family. Every line erased me further, painted her as the sole product of their love and effort. I felt my nails dig into my palms. Beside me, Michael's hand tightened over mine, grounding me. Then my father's eyes flicked to me, cold and sharp. And though life sometimes takes people in unexpected directions, tonight is proof of what true commitment looks like. The implication was clear. I was the failure. Grace was the triumph. The room clapped politely. My vision blurred with rage. Later, while guests laughed and danced, I slipped outside for air. The night was cool, the garden lit with fairy lights strung across the trees. My heels crunched against the gravel path as I paced, my mind a whirlwind. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Daniel. He loosened his tie, looking troubled. "I'm sorry about tonight," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how complicated things were." I studied him, wary. "Complicated is one word for it." He hesitated. "Grace told me you cut yourself off from the family. That you didn't want anything to do with them." I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. He frowned. "That's not the truth." "Not even close. I told him everything. How I'd been thrown out, how my college fund had been stolen, how Grace had always been the golden child while I carried the weight. Daniel listened, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. That's not the story I was told. Shocking, I muttered. He shifted, clearly torn. I know it's not my place, but you deserve to be heard. At least once. Maybe tonight's not the night, but I cut him off with a shake of my head. Grace doesn't want me heard. She wants me gone. Always has. Daniel's eyes softened. Then maybe she's afraid of what you'll say. His words stuck with me as I returned inside. Grace avoided my gaze. My parents acted as though I didn't exist, but the whispers among the guests had shifted. I caught fragments. She's the CEO? So she built it on her own? That's not what Grace said. The cracks in their perfect facade were forming. When the bouquet toss came, I stood at the back, watching Grace play the blushing bride. As she turned and flung the flowers, her eyes flicked to me, filled with venom. She was scared. I could see it now. Not because I'd crashed her perfect night, but because my very presence threatened the story she'd built her life on. That she was the chosen one, the only success, the rightful heir to everything our parents offered. And I realized then, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth, and I was done being silent. I didn't sleep that night. After we left the wedding, after Leo was tucked into bed, and Michael fell into exhausted sleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The words from my father's toast replayed in my mind like poison on a loop. Grace is our pride, our brightest star. That phrase should have rolled off me by now. After all, hadn't I spent over a decade proving I didn't need their approval? I'd built an empire. I'd created a life without them. But the sting wasn't about me. It was about the truth. They had erased me. And the longer I stayed silent, a more their version of the story became reality. In their narrative, I was the bitter, unstable older daughter who had abandoned them. Grace was the sacrifice, the savior, the one who carried the family's honor. But that wasn't the truth. I got up and padded into my office, the city lights glowing through the window. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to type. Not emails, not memos, just memories. Every detail from the night they threw me out. Every receipt I still had from the months I struggled to survive. Every letter of recommendation I begged for when I couldn't afford tuition. Every late bill notice I'd shoved in a door. Piece by piece, I built my own story. The true one. By the time the sun rose, my eyes were raw. But I had the beginnings of something powerful. A dossier. The next morning, over coffee, Michael noticed the stack of papers spread across the table. What are you doing? I'm done being erased, I said simply. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then let's make sure, when you speak, no one can ignore it. And then, if you want to confirm that one character is so rich, that's the thing about Michael. He never tried to protect me by silencing me. He strengthened me by believing me. I knew I couldn't just march into my parents' house and demand recognition. That would only feed their narrative that I was hysterical, vengeful, unstable. No, if I wanted justice, if I wanted revenge, it had to be meticulous. Step 1 was research. I reached out to old acquaintances from high school, from those early college years, people who'd witnessed how my parents treated me. One by one, I collected their stories. I remember you working double shifts while Grace got a new car, one said. You always babysat my kids because your parents wouldn't give you gas money, another recalled. You were sleeping on my couch when your dad cut you off. I'll swear to it, a third promised. I Every conversation added another layer, another voice confirming that I hadn't imagined it. Step 2 was evidence. I dug through old boxes and storage, pulling out anything that could corroborate my story. Bank statements showing the drained college account, letters from financial aid offices denying my appeals, pay stubs from 3 jobs at once, proving I was clawing my way through while Grace was funded like royalty. And then, almost miraculously, I found it. A copy of my acceptance letter to Stanford, the one I never got to use. I held it in my hands, tears stinging my eyes. Proof. They couldn't deny it now. Step 3 was timing. I could have gone public immediately, but that would have been sloppy. Revenge is like chess. You don't show your queen until you're ready for checkmate. So I waited, watched. Grace and Daniel's honeymoon photos flooded social media. Curated perfection. Beaches, champagne, sunsets. My parents posted endlessly about their perfect couple. I let them bask. Let them believe they'd won. Because when the fall came, it would hurt more. The real opening came sooner than I expected. A month after the wedding, I got an email from an old classmate named Lindsay, now a journalist for a popular lifestyle magazine. She'd seen photos from the wedding online and recognized me. "Amber, weren't you the one who founded Medova? I'd love to do a feature on your journey." At first, I hesitated. Did I want to tie my story to my family publicly? Medova was my achievement, my clean slate. But then I realized this was my stage. Evelyn had her galas, my father had his speeches, Grace had her curated social media. This was mine. When Lindsay came to interview me, I didn't hold back. I told her everything, not just about building Medova, but about the years before. The betrayal, the exile, the way I clawed my way out of nothing. She listened, wide-eyed, recording every word. When I finished, she said quietly, "You know this is going to cause a firestorm, right?" "Good," I said. "Let it burn." While the article was being prepared, I set another piece of my plan in motion. I invited Grace and Daniel to dinner. Grace nearly spat her refusal when she picked up the phone, but Daniel intervened. "Maybe it's time," he said gently in the background. So they came. The night of the dinner, I cooked steak and roasted vegetables, keeping everything calm, casual. Leo chattered happily at the table, unaware of the undercurrents. Michael steered conversation towards safe topics, but halfway through, I dropped the first card. "I'm being profiled in Modern Woman magazine next month," I said casually, slicing into my steak. "They're doing a feature on women who built companies from nothing." And Grace's fork froze midair. "From nothing?" she repeated, her voice brittle. "Yes," I said, smiling sweetly. "They were particularly interested in how I was cut off by my family at 19, how I survived homelessness, how I built an empire without a dime of help." Her face drained of color. Daniel's eyes flicked to her, then to me, realization dawning. My parents hadn't told him the real story. Grace hadn't either. For the rest of dinner, Grace picked at her food, her mask cracking. Daniel, meanwhile, asked me question after question, clearly piecing things together. When they left, Grace hissed in my ear at the door. "What are you doing?" I leaned in, whispering back, "I'm telling the truth. You should try it sometime." 2 weeks later, the article dropped. The headline blazed across the cover. From homeless teen to healthcare CEO, the untold story of Amber Collins. Inside, the feature painted my life in vivid detail. The betrayal of losing my college fund, the years of struggle, the rise of Medova. Lindsay had done her homework, even interviewing some of the old friends who confirmed how my parents had treated me. The story went viral, not just locally, nationally. Suddenly, my inbox was flooded with messages, strangers telling me I inspired them, women saying they'd been disowned, cut off, erased by their families too. colleagues reaching out with respect I hadn't expected. And the Collins family, they were exposed. I didn't hear from my parents directly, not at first, but Grace called in a panic. How could you do this to us? Do you know what people are saying? I stayed calm. I didn't do anything to you. I told my story. If you come off badly, that's because you were. She sputtered. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. I laughed coldly. Jealous. I built everything you thought you were entitled to, and I did it without stealing from anyone. There was silence, then the sound of her sobbing before she hung up. For the first time, I felt it, the shift of power. For years, they had controlled the narrative. For years, I was the ghost, the erased one. Now, the truth was out, undeniable, unspinnable, and this was just the beginning. The thing about lies is that they're fragile. They can last for years, sometimes decades, but when the first crack appears, the whole thing begins to shatter. And after the article dropped, the cracks spread through my family's lives like wildfire. At first, there was silence. Grace didn't return my texts. My parents didn't call. Evelyn, the queen of curated family updates on Facebook, went dark. For a week, it was like they'd gone underground, hoping if they stayed quiet long enough, the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when the whole town is talking. It started small. Neighbors whispering, acquaintances raising eyebrows when they passed my parents in the grocery store. Then it grew. Patients at their clinic canceled appointments. Local reporters sniffed around, eager to expand on Lindsay's article. And the crowning blow, the hospital board began reviewing my father's standing as a physician. He had always been the man of authority in our town, the respected Dr. Collins. Now, he was the man who'd disowned his daughter and stolen her future. Grace tried to salvage things. She posted photos with Daniel, trying to drown the scandal in a flood of smiling wedding shots. But the comments told a different story. Is this the sister you stole from? Your wedding was paid for with her college money? How do you sleep at night? The internet is merciless when it smells hypocrisy, and Grace bled hypocrisy. But I wasn't finished. I had one final strike planned, and it required timing. A month after the article dropped, Grace and Daniel hosted a housewarming party at their new home. Of course they did. The Collinses never missed an opportunity to show off. Their invitations went out to half the town, plus a generous sprinkling of Daniel's colleagues from the hospital. When the invite landed in my bail box, I laughed. Grace must have assumed I'd stay away, that I'd hide in shame, too afraid to confront them on their turf. But revenge isn't about hiding. It's about walking straight into the fire and making sure they burn first. Michael wasn't thrilled at first. Amber, you've already proven your point. Do you really need to go? I met his eyes, steady. This isn't just about me. It's about showing them they can't erase me anymore. Not in public, not in private, not ever again. He sighed, but he understood. Then we do it on your terms. The night of the party, I wore power like armor, a sleek black gown, diamond studs, and heels that clicked like gunfire on marble. Michael at my side, Leo staying with June for the night. I wasn't just walking into their house, I was walking into their stage, and I planned to steal the spotlight. The Collins home gleamed with wealth. Crystal chandeliers, catered hors d'oeuvres, a string quartet in the corner. Guests mingled, sipping wine, laughing too loudly. But when I walked in, silence rippled across the room like a wave. Grace froze mid-laugh, her champagne glass trembling. Daniel's eyes widened, but this time there was no surprise. Just something that looked a lot like pity. Amber, Grace said, her voice sharp as broken glass. What are you doing here? I smiled sweetly. You invited me. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. But before she could speak, a voice rang out from the crowd. Isn't she the CEO? The one from the article? Heads turned, phones lifted, guests whispered, and in that moment, I knew I had them exactly where I wanted them. The party dragged forward, but the tension was thick. Grace flitted from guest to guest, desperate to control the narrative, but I could see the strain in her smile, the tightness in her shoulders. My parents avoided me entirely, lurking in corners like ghosts. Then came the toasts. Daniel stood first, thanking everyone for coming, speaking warmly about their new home. He gestured to Grace, praising her as his partner, his love, his anchor. She beamed, soaking it in. And then, out of nowhere, Daniel added, "Of course, every family has its complexities, but I believe truth always finds a way to shine." His eyes flicked to me as he said it. Grace's smile faltered. When it was her turn to speak, she tried to regain control. She thanked everyone for celebrating their fresh start, praised her husband, and then inevitably tried to twist the knife. "Family is everything," she said, her eyes boring into me, "and while some people choose to walk away, the rest of us stay and build something real." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had read the article. Everyone knew the lie embedded in her words. I raised my glass, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying through the silence, "I didn't walk away. I was thrown out, at 19, with nothing but a suitcase and the clothes on my back." Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes turned to me. Grace's face flushed crimson. I stepped forward, my heels echoing like punctuation. While Grace enjoyed the Stanford Fund, I worked 3 jobs just to survive. I slept on couches. I ate ramen. And yet, I built something from nothing. Not with their support, but in spite of their betrayal. The room was silent except for the frantic beat of my own heart. I turned to Grace, meeting her eyes. "So, when you talk about family, Grace, remember this: you didn't build. You inherited. And you inherited because I was erased. Not anymore." Phones recorded. Guests whispered. Daniel's hand clenched around his glass. Grace stood frozen, her perfect mask shattered. And in that moment, I saw it, the shift. The guests weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at her with disgust, with disbelief. The golden child had been tarnished. I didn't stay long after that. Michael and I slipped out quietly, leaving the whispers behind us. But the damage was done. Within days, clips from the party surfaced online. Someone had posted my speech on TikTok. It spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. "She's a queen. Imagine stealing from your sister and still acting superior." Grace is finished. And finished she was. Daniel, to his credit, confronted her. He called me a week later, his voice heavy. "Amber, I had no idea she lied to me about everything." "She's always lied," I said simply. "I don't know if I can stay married to someone who could do that to her own sister." I didn't respond. It wasn't my place. But I knew the truth. Grace had sabotaged herself. As for my parents, their silence said everything. Their clinic's reputation crumbled. Their patient list dwindled. And for the first time in their lives, they were the ones whispered about in the grocery store. The mighty Collins name was dust. And me? I finally felt free. Fallout doesn't come in an explosion. It comes in the quiet after, in the whispered conversations, in the sideways glances, in the hollow silences where power used to live. For Grace, the fallout was brutal. Her carefully curated image, the golden daughter, the perfect bride, the shining success, shattered in one night. The clip of my speech at her housewarming party spread like wildfire online. and there was no way to spin it. People believed what they saw, and what they saw was a spoiled younger sister, exposed for what she really was. Her social media filled with vitriol. Former friends unfollowed her. Comment sections turned toxic. Home wrecker of your sister's future. Entitled thief. Imagine living off what wasn't yours. She tried to fight back, posting tearful videos about misunderstandings and family disagreements, but they only fueled the fire. No one believed her anymore. The mask was gone, and behind it was something ugly. Daniel didn't stand by her. 2 weeks after the party, I got a call from him. His voice was flat, tired, drained. I asked Grace about everything. The fund, the way your parents treated you. She admitted it all. She said she deserved it, that you weren't worth the investment. He paused, the weight of his next words heavy. Amber, I can't build a life with someone who sees family that way, who lies so easily. We're done. I closed my eyes, a strange mix of pity and satisfaction washing over me. I'm sorry, Daniel. Don't be, he said. You saved me from a lifetime of lies. Grace moved back in with my parents not long after. But even there, she found no refuge. The Collins name had become synonymous with disgrace. Patients left the clinic in droves, unwilling to trust doctors who could betray their own child. Rumors swirled about financial strain, unpaid bills, even potential for closure. For years, my parents had walked through town with their heads high, untouchable. Now they walked fast, eyes down, avoiding everyone. Once, my mother spotted me at the farmer's market. She froze, clutching her bag of apples, her face a mix of anger and desperation. But she didn't approach. She just turned and walked the other way. It should have hurt, but it didn't. Not anymore. Meanwhile, my life grew lighter. The weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying, decades of needing their recognition, their validation, was gone. I didn't need them. I never had. Leo thrived too. He wasn't caught in the shadow of their disapproval or their manipulations. He just saw a mom who loved him fiercely and a dad who stood by them both. One night, while I was tucking him into bed, he looked at me and asked, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully, because sometimes, baby, people don't know how to love the right way, and until they learn, we have to keep our distance. He nodded thoughtfully. But you know how to love the right way. Tears pricked my eyes as I kissed his forehead. I try, sweetheart. I really try. Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still moments of anger, flashes of grief for the childhood I never got, for the family I never had. But slowly, those moments grew fewer. And in their place was something else. Peace. The Collins family had always believed they were untouchable, that they could rewrite the narrative, erase me, cast me out without consequence. But the truth caught up to them, and when it did, it wasn't me who was destroyed, it was them. There's a moment after everything burns down when you wonder what's left. For me, that moment came on a quiet Sunday morning. Michael was reading the paper, Leo was sprawled on the living room floor building towers with his blocks, and sunlight spilled through the window. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't dramatic, but it was peace. For years, I thought revenge would feel like a fireworks show, loud, bright, undeniable. And yes, there were flashes of that. Watching Grace's mask shatter at the housewarming party. Hearing Daniel admit she'd lied to him. seeing my parents' clinic collapse under the weight of their own hypocrisy. Those moments were satisfying. They were powerful. But the real victory, it was the silence that followed. The freedom of no longer carrying their rejection like a stone in my chest. The quiet of a home where love wasn't conditional, where my son could grow up without whispers of favoritism poisoning his childhood. I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about making them suffer. Sometimes it's about refusing to suffer anymore yourself. Do I still think about them? Yes. Some nights, I remember the girl I was at 19, standing in the rain with a suitcase, wondering how I'd survive. I ache for her. I wish I could tell her, "You'll be more than fine. You'll build something they can never take away." And sometimes I think about Grace, how empty her life must feel now that the facade has cracked. I don't pity her. She chose her path. But I recognize something familiar in her, a hunger for validation that will never be fed. The difference is, I stopped looking for it. That's the ultimate revenge. Not the viral article, not the public humiliation, not even the collapse of their reputation. The real revenge was taking back my power, my narrative, my life, refusing to let their choices define me any longer. Because in the end, they didn't erase me. They erased themselves, and I rose from the ashes they left behind. Now, when Leo looks at me and says, "You know how to love the right way," I know I've broken the cycle. I've built a different kind of family, one where love isn't conditional, one where survival turned into strength and strength turned into peace. That's justice. That's revenge. That's freedom. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did, drag the truth into the light, no matter the cost? For me, silence was never peace. It was a cage. Breaking it open was the only way I could breathe again. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever been gaslit, erased, or underestimated, only to rise anyway? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. If this story hit you in the chest, if it made you clench your fists when Grace lied, or smile when the truth finally came out, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of justice, revenge, and redemption. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that no matter how dark it feels, the truth always finds a way to shine. Because revenge isn't always about their downfall. Sometimes it's about your rise. And I rose.